We're now going to our next guest, and a lot of you are very familiar with the very distressing saga of survivors of Ireland's mother and baby homes. And we've spoken indeed to many, many people over 2018. The lovely Cathy McMahon, may she rest in peace, Rosemary, Adie, and also Fintan Dunne. Fintan joins me on the line now. He's at the moment dealing with the media side of the organisation, and I guess distraught and angry because the judge leading a commission of investigation into 14 such homes, mother and baby homes, has now requested an additional year to issue her final report. It was currently due by mid-February 2019 and eagerly anticipated in the hope of bringing closure to a dreadful, dreadful time in Irish history. Fintan, first of all, I really feel for all of you with this particular revelation that another year has been requested. But before we talk about that, can you tell people who are listening about why the organisation was set up in the first place?
Yes, I can indeed, Angela. And Irish First Mothers was set up by Cathy McMahon ahead of the international attention which came on Tuam with the story of the Tuam babies about 4 months beforehand. And from that seed grew a group of over 70 women who were in these institutions, mother and baby homes, some in county homes, and as you know, in many institutions around the country. So we have met with ministers and we have cooperated with government as best we could. That's Irish First Mothers. And not only the mothers, but also their infant survivors. There are individuals in Tuam, for example, who are awaiting the excavations there. They're also shattered today. The entire community is in shock. Just to get the context of this is the most important and internationally focused inquiry this government has ever conducted into the treatment of tens of thousands of women. Media crews from around the world were booking their places to be here in mid-February when the government would finally publish the report after a year's delay. The community of survivors were finally expecting that despite all the delays, they would get their closure in February. And then in January, where is the judge? Where is the minister? We're hearing this from Patsy McGarry in the Irish Times.
I believe, Fintan, that this is not the first, obviously, request for extensions. There's already been 2 extensions. The Judge Navan Murphy looking for another extension on this. What does this mean to the people waiting?
Well, it means that the judge and the minister, between the pair of them, have now destroyed the confidence of the survivor community in the operation of this commission of investigation. Irish First Mothers is asking for Judge Murphy to consider her position now. She has caused needless injury to the community, either by incompetence or by failing to speak out when the minister didn't speak out. The same applies to the minister. We should have been told that they weren't going to meet this deadline 4 months ago, 5 months ago. How far back do you find out that you're not going to meet a deadline and that you're going to miss it by a year? And you tell the community, affected community, a few weeks before you're about to miss the deadline by a year that you're going to miss it. This shows complete disrespect. I mean, don't listen to just me on this. Peter Mulryan, who has his sister's remains buried in Tuam, says that the longer this goes on, the more torture is put on us.
Are they going to get the year, Fintan, as such, or is it a request at the moment?
It's a request which has been received, and we don't know when, by the government from the judge. That's the big question. When did the judge request this? Because the minister's apparently bringing it to Cabinet in order for the Cabinet to look at it. We never should have done it this way. We should have looked at a summary or an overview of cases and not go on a case-by-case basis, which ends up in this inevitable kind of delay. This is gross incompetence. The community are disgusted, Angela.
Oh, I'd listen, don't worry, I'm not missing that point, believe me, from even just what you're saying, and I do have huge sympathy for everybody involved, but that's a personal opinion. In relation to people giving statements, etc., even to this commission, I believe a lot of those were not affidavits as such, they weren't sworn statements. So, I mean, for people on an individual basis, what were they hoping from the commission, so to speak?
Well, they were hoping for an early result. This was the most important thing. Remember, this began in 2014. We're now in early 2019, and we still haven't got substantive findings. So what they were hoping for back in 2014 when this emerged, and finally in 2015 when this Commission of Investigation was set up, was a timely report which would enable the government to move ahead with redress and move ahead to address the current care needs of this community, who are still hanging out there awaiting a substantive finding. Now, the judge in her first interim report, which she produced, did not make substantive findings in relation to the mothers who were affected, and only made, I would call it, tame findings in relation to the survivors, infants who grew up in the homes. So therefore, absent of a decent finding from a commission, the government cannot act on redress, and the entire system remains frozen in time until such time as these matters can be findings of fact of a commission.
And on top of that, of course, there's a huge expenditure in the context of the Commission if it does get this extension of time for another year in terms of the processes. But I gather some of the people who go along to give information, etc., are having difficulty even getting their travel expenses.
People have had difficulty getting travel expenses, but I'll tell you who didn't have difficulty getting travel expenses: those who went with the Minister to Boston in November for a conference about transitional justice. And they stayed with the Minister in a luxury Boston hotel. I couldn't attend there. I'm not sure if you have the money to go over there to listen to the Minister tell people in Boston about how she's doing justice here in Ireland. Now, let me point out that the Minister's own appointment to advise her on this transitional justice process, Dr. James Gallen of DCU, recently said that the state just doesn't get it. And he said that the state's more interested in its liability and covering up its past failings than it is in justice for the victims. That's the Minister's own appointed transitional justice advisor. That's why we're saying to the Minister, it's time for you to go, Minister. You've lost the confidence of everybody associated with this process by your mismanagement of it and by your failure to ensure the state stands up to its responsibilities. And Judge Yvonne Murphy, you have betrayed the trust of those who put trust in you, and you have failed them in what you... It is just not credible that you need to miss a deadline by another year after already requesting a one-year delay. You need to go. An international judge needs to come in and help the two colleagues of Judge Murphy to complete the business. I have absolutely no doubt that her colleagues in there, Dr. William Duncan and Professor Mary Daly, are well capable of assisting a new judge to complete a summary overview findings report as soon as possible. And then we'll go about completing the business in a more complete way without hopefully too much expenditure.
Final question for you, Fintan. Do you think that cooperation will now cease in relation to the people who have been affected by all of this and the actual commission if this extension is actually given?
Really, we are, and we'd appeal to those of you who are listening today. We are helpless without your support.
Yeah. They
can do this, and they are doing this to the affected community. I'd ask you to get onto your TDs and to ask them to intervene and stop this mistreatment of the survivor community. It's not acceptable.
Well, on that note, Fintan, we're going to leave it. Can I thank you for taking the time for coming on air? I know you're very distressed about this, and it's a subject you're very passionate about, understandably. Our thoughts go out to all the people who are suffering today at this revelation, and we'll absolutely have a chat again sometime in the future.
Thanks very much for your continued interest. And the people down the country have got to realise that it's down the country, and I'm speaking from Kilkenny, that we know the true meaning of these issues, and they don't get it in Dublin. We have to make them get it. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you very much.